The snow fell like frozen tears on Christmas Eve. Margaret Hayes stood trembling outside Chateau Noir, her breath forming ghosts in the negative 8-degree air. Through the frosted glass, she saw them, the warm people, the golden lights, the abundance she'd forgotten existed. Her fingers, purple and stiff, pushed open the door. Silence swallowed the piano music. Perfume and wine and judgment hit her face. Designer suits turned. Diamond earrings caught the chandelier light as heads swiveled toward the ragged woman tracking snow across marble floors. Margaret's eyes found him, the silver-haired man, alone at table 9, cutting into Wellington steak. Her shoes squeaked, each step an apology, each breath a prayer. She reached his table. "May I have your leftover food, sir?" William Thompson looked up. Blue eyes met blue eyes. Time stopped. His fork clattered against fine china. "Sarah," he whispered, though that made no sense. Those eyes. After 15 years of searching. Those impossible blue eyes. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. 40 years earlier, Margaret Hayes had been someone else entirely. At 26, she was head nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, pulling double shifts and loving every exhausted minute of it. The night of the blizzard changed everything. February cold bit through ambulance metal as she delivered a baby in the back of a vehicle buried in snow. The mother, Rebecca Thompson, had warm brown eyes that never stopped looking at Margaret, even as life drained from her body. "Promise me," Rebecca whispered, her hand gripping Margaret's with surprising strength. "Tell William," she coughed, blood on her lips. "Love never dies. Find the blue-eyed angel when he's lost." The baby cried. Sarah, a perfect, furious bundle of life. Rebecca pressed something into Margaret's palm, a silver necklace, still warm from her throat. Then silence. Margaret had kept that necklace for 40 years through everything that followed. Through the golden decade when she became director of nursing, earning 6 figures and buying a house with her husband Robert. Through the nightmare year when her brother Bobby stumbled into her kitchen, pupils like pinpricks, begging her to co-sign for his debts. $300,000 that evaporated into veins and smoke. She'd signed anyway. Blood was supposed to be thicker than water. Then came Robert's diagnosis. Stage 4 lung cancer, the doctor said. Though Robert had never smoked a day in his life. 4 years of treatment drained their savings $680,000 that bought them borrowed time and nothing more. Margaret sold the house, the car, the furniture. She'd have sold her bones if it meant one more sunrise with him. Robert died on a Tuesday. Their son David shipped out to Afghanistan on Thursday. That was 10 years ago now. David sent 3 letters, then nothing. The Marines told her he'd completed his service. After that silence, a mother's worst nightmare wasn't death. It was not knowing. Margaret learned to sleep in shelters, then doorways, then nowhere at all. But she never pawned Rebecca's necklace. Across town, William Thompson sat in his corner office of Thompson Hospitality Group and felt nothing. His empire sprawled across 47 hotels worth $520 million. Numbers on screens, rooms he'd never sleep in. Sarah had been dead 14 years, 18 years old. Driving home from college on a rainy October night while he took a conference call he couldn't even remember now. The police found her Honda wrapped around a telephone pole. They said she died instantly, But Bill knew better. She died alone, waiting for a father who'd chosen spreadsheets over picking up his daughter. After that, something in Bill calcified. He fired people for being late, for mistakes, for reminding him too much of his own failures. 200 employees in 10 years. Chris, his adopted son, called him a monster. Bill didn't argue. 3 months ago, his doctor showed him scans, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less. Bill hadn't told anyone. What was the point? He'd die the way he lived alone. Successful and completely hollow. He went to Chateau Noir on Christmas Eve because it was where he'd proposed to Rebecca 45 years ago. A sentimental gesture from a man who'd forgotten how to feel sentiment. Then a homeless woman asked for his leftovers. And those blue eyes, Sarah's eyes. Rebecca's eyes looked straight through him into the past. Tom Richardson appeared like a storm, his manager's jacket crisp as his expression. He'd worked at Chateau Noir for 20 years and knew exactly what homeless people did to a 5-star restaurant's reputation. His hand reached for Margaret's elbow. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to." His fingers touched her coat. His eyes met hers. Tom froze. The scar above her left eyebrow. The particular shade of blue in her iris. The way her mouth curved even when she wasn't smiling. Memory hit him like ice water 15 years old. His bicycle mangled under a delivery truck. Blood in his eyes. A woman's voice cutting through the panic. "Stay with me, honey. I've got you." Margaret Hayes had sat with him in the ambulance, held his hand through surgery, visited him twice in the hospital, even though she didn't know his mother, didn't know his name, didn't owe him anything. "Mrs. Hayes." His voice cracked. Margaret squinted at him. Recognition flickered. Little Tommy Richardson." "Ah, yes." Tom's throat tightened. His hand dropped. Every instinct screamed at him to embrace her, but his job, his reputation. The eyes of 70 dinner guests burned into his back. A chair scraped across marble. Preston Blackwell III stood, his face red above his $1,000 tie. "What the hell is this? I'm paying $300 for this meal, and you're letting homeless trash stand at tables." Other diners murmured agreement. A woman clutched her purse. A man pulled out his phone, already recording. "Security!" Preston barked. "Now!" Tom stood paralyzed between duty and debt. Margaret started backing away, her dignity somehow intact despite the torn coat, despite everything. "She stays." Bill's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He rose from his seat, and the room remembered who he was. William Thompson, the man who owned half of Boston's luxury real estate, the man whose donations kept symphonies playing and museums open. "Anyone who has a problem with my dinner guest," Bill continued, his tone ice over steel, "can leave. I'll comp your meals personally." Preston sputtered. "This is outrageous. The door's behind you." Silence crystallized. Preston threw his napkin down and stormed out. 2 other couples followed. Tom watched $50,000 in annual business walk away and couldn't bring himself to care. Bill gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit." Margaret hesitated, her hands shaking. Not from cold anymore, from something deeper. The way this man looked at her. Like he was seeing a ghost, like he was drowning and she was there. She sat. Bill signaled to a hovering waiter. Wellington steak, medium rare, lobster bisque, the creme brulee for dessert. He paused. "And hot tea." Immediately. The tea arrived first. Margaret wrapped both hands around the cup, and Bill watched her carefully. Her fingers trembled so badly the porcelain rattled. When she tried to lift it, liquid sloshed over the rim. Here. Bill reached across, steadying her hands with his own. That's when he saw it. A scar across her right palm, raised and shiny. Old burned tissue, at least 30 years healed. The kind of scar you got reaching into fire. His mind flashed a news story from decades ago. Hospital fire, pediatric wing. A nurse who'd gone back in, pulled 3 children out, sustained 3rd-degree burns. Sarah had been one of those children. Your name, Bill said quietly. Please. Margaret Hayes. She paused, old habits surfacing. Ma'am, I mean. Sir, I'm sorry, I shouldn't. You were a nurse, not a question. Margaret nodded anyway. The Wellington arrived, steam rising from perfect pastry. Margaret stared at it like it was a painting, something to admire but never touch. Bill picked up her fork, placed it in her hand, closed her fingers around it. Eat. She cut into the beef. The fork made it halfway to her mouth before it slipped, clattering against china. Her hands simply couldn't hold steady. Humiliation colored her face. Bill said nothing. He cut his own steak into smaller pieces, slid his plate toward her, took hers for himself. Margaret's eyes filled. Why are you doing this? Those eyes. Bill leaned forward. I've been searching for those eyes for 15 years. I don't understand. Tell me about your nursing career. Where did you work? Massachusetts General, labor and delivery mostly. Then Margaret stopped, some memory catching her. There was a blizzard once, worst I'd ever seen. February something. The ambulance got stuck and I had to. She looked up. I helped deliver a baby in the back of an ambulance. The mother didn't make it. The room tilted. Bill gripped the table edge. What year? I'm not sure. Long time ago. Maybe. 1985, Bill whispered. February 15th. The baby was Sarah. The mother was Rebecca. Margaret's fork fell again. This time neither of them moved to pick it up. Rebecca Thompson. Margaret's voice fractured. She had brown eyes. She kept saying the word stuck. 40 years of carrying someone else's dying wish. She kept saying things. About love, about angels. Bill stood so fast his chair toppled backward. Diners turned. Tom rushed over. Bill didn't see any of them. What did she say? His voice was raw, desperate. What were her last words? I've waited 40 years. Please. Margaret rose too. Smaller than him, but somehow unmovable. She reached into her coat, that terrible, thin coat, and pulled out a silver necklace. Tarnished now. But Bill recognized it. He'd given it to Rebecca on their wedding day. She gave me this, made me promise to give it to you when Margaret's throat worked. When you needed it most, she said. Find the blue-eyed angel when he's lost. She said love never dies. It transforms. She said. Margaret stopped, shaking her head. Not here. Not like this. Some truths need the right moment, Mr. Thompson. Tell me now. No. The word landed between them like a wall. Bill stared at this woman who had nothing, who was no one, who somehow held the last piece of his wife's voice and refused to give it to him. I'll pay you. Name your price. Margaret's expression didn't change. Some things don't have prices. Then what do you want? She looked at the uneaten Wellington, at the restaurant full of people who'd never known hunger, at the man in front of her who owned everything except the one thing that mattered. "I want to know my son is alive," Margaret said simply. "I want to know he's okay. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want one more day with him, just one. That's all I want in this world." Bill saw it then. The truth behind the blue eyes. This woman had lost everything too. Different roads, same destination. Both of them standing in ruins, looking for something they'd never find. "Tell me about your son," Bill said. So she did. Bill's office at Thompson Plaza occupied the entire 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Boston's glittering skyline. But Margaret barely noticed. The warmth hit her first real heat, the kind that reached bones. She swayed slightly, and Bill guided her to a leather sofa that probably cost more than her entire lost house. Coffee or tea? He was already moving to a sidebar. "I shouldn't be here." "You're here because I asked you here," Bill poured without waiting for an answer. His hands, Margaret noticed, shook almost as badly as hers. "Your son, David. Tell me." Margaret pulled a photograph from her coat pocket. The edges were soft with handling. The image faded. A young man in Marine Corps dress blues, 28 years old. Dark hair cut military short. Blue eyes that matched his mother's. Bill took the photo. His face went white. "But when did you last see him?" 10 years ago. He came home from Afghanistan for 2 weeks. Then Margaret's voice caught. He said he needed to clear his head. Left his apartment. Left everything. The Marines told me he'd completed his service honorably. After that, nothing. It's been 10 years of nothing. Bill stared at the photograph. His breathing had changed, shallow and quick. "Mr. Thompson." "I know this face." Bill moved to his desk, unlocked a drawer, pulled out a folder. Inside were security camera stills, grainy but clear enough. A parking garage, Bill on the ground, 3 men with knives, and another man bearded, gaunt, but unmistakably the same man from Margaret's photograph launching himself at the attackers. This was 3 years ago, January. I was working late, stupid enough to walk to my car alone at 2 in the morning. Bill's finger traced the images. These men wanted my wallet, my watch, my life probably. This man, your son, came out of nowhere. He fought like Bill stopped, like someone trained to kill. Disarmed 2 of them before they knew what hit them. The third ran. Margaret's hands covered her mouth. I tried to thank him, tried to ask his name. He just looked at me and said, "You remind me of someone who deserved better." Then he disappeared into the stairwell. I had security search for hours. Nothing. I hired 3 different private investigators over the next year. They found nothing. It was like he was a ghost. He was here. Margaret's voice broke. 3 years ago, he was here, and I didn't know. She stopped. Something closing in her expression. "What's that?" "Nothing. Mrs. Hayes." "Margaret, please?" She took the photo back, held it against her chest. "He's alive. That's all that matters. He's alive somewhere in this city." Bill sat across from her. "I'll find him. I have resources, people." "So did your investigators." "They weren't looking for the right reasons." Margaret studied him. This man with his tailored suit and his corner office and his obvious wealth. She'd learned to read people during 40 years of nursing when someone was lying about their pain level, when they were sicker than they admitted, when they were dying and knew it but wouldn't say. Bill Thompson was dying. She could see it in the grayish cast beneath his tan, the way he held his left side when he thought she wasn't looking, the careful way he moved. 6 months. Maybe less. "Why do you care about finding my son?" Margaret asked quietly. "Because someone should have been looking for me 3 years ago when those men had knives at my throat. Someone should have cared. Your son did." Bill's jaw tightened. "And because you deserve to know he's alive. That's what you wanted. Wasn't it one more day with him? I can give you that. You can't buy everything, Mr. Thompson. I'm not trying to buy anything. I'm trying to..." He stopped, searched for words. "I failed my daughter. I wasn't there when she needed me. I can't fix that. But maybe I can do this one thing right." Margaret reached into her coat again. This time she pulled out a canvas bag, worn soft with age. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. 2,847, Margaret said. "One for every day since he left. I write him every night. Tell him about my day, about the people I meet, about the sky. Sometimes I tell him I'm sorry for whatever I did that made him leave. Sometimes I tell him stories from when he was little. Sometimes I just tell him I love him." She set the bag on Bill's desk. The weight of it, the sheer volume of unopened envelopes, said more than words could. "I keep thinking if I write enough, if I love him enough on paper, somehow he'll feel it. Somehow he'll come home." Margaret's hands twisted together. But 10 years is a long time to wait for a miracle. Bill opened his mouth to respond. The office door slammed open. Christopher Thompson stormed in, his face flushed with fury. At 42, Chris had his late mother Rebecca's brown eyes and none of her warmth. He wore a 3-piece suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent and the expression of someone who owned the world. "Dad, what the hell is this?" Chris gestured at Margaret. "Security called me. Said you brought a homeless woman to your office. I thought they were joking." "Chris, this is Mrs. Margaret Hayes." "Margaret, my son Christopher." "Son." Chris laughed, sharp and bitter. "Right. The adopted son you keep around for appearances." He turned back to Margaret. "No offense, ma'am, but you need to leave. My father isn't well, and he's clearly not thinking straight." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly," Bill said coldly. Do you know what the board will say when they hear about this? Do you know what the press will do if they find out Boston's hotel magnate is having private meetings with vagrants?" Margaret stood. "I should go." "Sit down," Bill ordered. "Dad, for God's sake. You want to talk about family? Chris, fine. Let's talk about how you've been meeting with lawyers behind my back, how you've been building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent, how you think I don't know you're positioning yourself to take control of the company." Chris's face went still. "Someone has to protect your legacy." "My legacy?" Bill's laugh was acid. "You mean my money? Be honest about what you want, at least. You're 70 years old, 68, and you're making emotional decisions, bringing strangers into your office, probably planning to give away money to some sob story. I'm trying to save you from yourself. I don't need saving." "Then what do you call this?" Chris waved at Margaret again. "What could you possibly want from her?" Bill stood, moved to the window. Boston spread out below them, a city of 800,000 people. One of them was David Hayes, and Bill was going to find him. She knows what my wife said before she died. Rebecca's last words. The ones I never got to hear because I was stuck in traffic 40 years ago while my wife bled out in an ambulance. Bill turned back. Mrs. Hayes was there. She heard everything. And until she's ready to tell me, she stays. Chris's expression shifted. Calculating now? And what's she charging for this information? 10,050 more. Chris, that's enough. No, let's put a number on it. How much to hear what Grandma Rebecca said? Because I'm betting the price goes up the longer Dad waits. Margaret's voice cut through the tension, quiet but sharp. I don't want money. Everyone wants money. Not everyone. Margaret looked at Bill. I'm leaving now. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Thompson. It was kind of you. Wait. Bill reached for her arm, then stopped himself. Please. I need to know what she said. I've needed to know for 40 years. And you'll know, Margaret said softly. When the time is right. When you're ready to hear it. Not tonight. Then, when your son stops looking at me like I'm trying to steal from you. When you're both ready to understand what love actually means. She moved toward the door. Good night, gentlemen. Margaret, wait. At least let me. I have a hotel room. Warm. Safe. Let me. She turned back, and her blue eyes held something ancient and sad and absolutely immovable. I've survived 10 years. Mr. Thompson. I'll survive tonight. She pulled her coat tighter. But if you truly want to help, find my son, that's all I ask. Find David and tell him his mother never stopped loving him. Tell him he doesn't have to hide anymore. Then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Chris exhaled. Dad, you can't seriously be. Get out. What? I said get out of my office. Now. Chris stared at his father for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. Bill stood alone in his office, holding a photograph of a man who'd saved his life and a bag full of letters written to a ghost. Through the window, he could see snow beginning to fall again. Somewhere in that snow, Margaret Hayes was walking back into the cold. And somewhere in this city, her son was hiding from a forgiveness he didn't think he deserved. Bill picked up his phone. Security, I need you to follow the woman who just left my office. Don't approach her. Just make sure she's safe. And get me the contact information for every veteran center, every shelter, every hospital in Boston. I need to find someone. Bill hired 15 people. Private investigators, former police detectives, security specialists who knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. By Christmas morning, they had a pattern. David Hayes appeared at 3 locations with clockwork regularity. The Veterans Center on Commonwealth Avenue every Tuesday and Thursday morning. Public Garden on Saturdays. Always the same bench near the bridge. Downtown Crossing most weekday afternoons. Standing outside the CVS pharmacy. Never going in. He's careful, the lead investigator told Bill. Moves in predictable patterns, but never stays anywhere long enough to be approached. Classic trauma behavior. Hypervigilance. What does he do for money? The investigator hesitated. We're still tracking that. But Bill's head of security, Marcus Webb, found the answer through less official channels. A conversation with a friend who worked custodial at Boston Medical Center. A name mentioned in passing. A man who showed up at 3 in the morning to clean operating rooms, who worked in cash, who never spoke to anyone. David Hayes is working under the table, Marcus reported. Night shift custodian, has been for 6 years. The overnight manager, Jerry Walsh, knows who he is but hasn't reported it. Says Hayes is the most reliable worker he's ever had. Bill arrived at Boston Medical Center at 2:45 on the morning after Christmas. The hospital hummed with quiet activity, late-night emergencies, skeleton staff, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He found Jerry Walsh drinking coffee in the custodial office. "I'm looking for David Hayes." Walsh, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and careful hands, studied Bill. "And you are?" "Someone who owes him a debt. He doesn't want debts. Doesn't want to be found, either. His mother is looking for him." Walsh's expression shifted. "Margaret, tall woman, used to be a nurse. You know her. She comes by sometimes. Doesn't know David works here, but I think she feels close to him in hospitals. Like maybe he'll walk through a door someday." Walsh sighed. "David made me promise not to tell her. Said it would break her heart to see what he's become." "Where is he?" "Or 3. Cleaning surgical equipment." Walsh stood. "But Mr. Thompson, and yeah, I know who you are. That boy is hanging on by a thread. You push too hard, he'll run. And next time, he won't leave a trail." Bill found him in a sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and bleach. David Hayes wore scrubs and rubber gloves, methodically cleaning surgical trays with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was gaunt, maybe 140 pounds on a frame that should carry 180. His beard was unkempt, his hair longer than military regulation. But his hands were steady, his movements efficient. He didn't look up when Bill entered. "Jerry told you," David said quietly. "Your mother writes to you every day." "Did you know that?" David's hands stilled on the surgical tray. "You should leave. 2,847 letters. One for every day you've been gone. Please leave. She thinks she did something wrong. She thinks that's why you disappeared." Bill moved closer. "I told her I'd find you. I told her I'd tell you she never stopped loving you." David set down the surgical instrument. His shoulders were shaking. "You shouldn't have done that. 3 years ago, you saved my life in a parking garage. You could have kept walking. Most people would have. But you didn't. You reminded me of someone." "Who?" "Someone who deserved better than what I gave them." David finally turned around. His eyes, Margaret's blue eyes, were haunted. "Is she okay, my mother?" "No. She's been living on the streets for 10 years looking for you." The words hit like bullets. David stumbled back against the counter. No. She had the house, the savings. She had. Your father's cancer took everything. She's been homeless since he died." Bill pulled out his phone, showed pictures his security team had taken. Margaret sleeping on a bench. Margaret in a soup kitchen line. Margaret trudging through snow in a coat too thin for Boston winter. David made a sound like an animal in pain. "She's dying too," Bill said quietly. "Pneumonia. Probably. Maybe worse. She doesn't have much time left." "Stop. Please stop. Why did you leave?" The question hung between them. David's breathing was ragged, his hands gripping the counter edge so hard his knuckles went white. Afghanistan, David finally said. I was a sergeant, had 12 men under my command, good men. We were on our last mission before coming home. There was a village Taliban had taken civilians hostage. 30 people, mostly women and children. Bill waited. We went in to extract them. Everything went wrong. 2 of my men got hit in the crossfire. Not fatal wounds, but bad enough. I had a choice. David's voice cracked. Get the civilians out or go back for my men. 30 lives or 2. The math was obvious. But one of those men, he stopped, swallowed hard. Jimmy Hayes, my cousin, my mother's nephew. Family. You chose the civilians. I chose 30 lives over 2. By the time we got the civilians secure and went back, David pressed his palms against his eyes. Jimmy died calling for his mother, for my mother, because I left him. You made the right call. Did I tell that to my aunt who lost her son? Tell that to Jimmy's wife and 2 kids. Tell that to my mother who... David's voice broke completely. How could I go home? How could I look her in the eye and say I let her nephew die, that I chose strangers over family? Bill understood then. The weight David carried wasn't just PTSD from combat. It was survivor's guilt mixed with family shame, twisted into something that made living feel like betrayal. I let my daughter die too, Bill said. Different circumstances, same guilt. Sarah called me that night. Said she was scared to drive in the rain, asked if I could pick her up. I was in a meeting. I told her to drive carefully and hung up. She wrapped her car around a telephone pole 20 minutes later. David looked at him. For 14 years, I've been trying to work enough, earn enough, achieve enough to somehow balance the scales, to prove I deserved to survive when she didn't. It doesn't work. The guilt doesn't get smaller. You just learn to carry it differently. I can't see her, David whispered. I can't let her see what I've become. She doesn't care what you've become. She just wants to know you're alive. Bill pulled out the canvas bag of letters, set it on the counter. 2,847 letters. She writes about the weather, about people she meets, about memories from when you were small. She writes that she loves you, that whatever you did, wherever you are, she forgives you. David reached for the bag with shaking hands. Opened the top letter, his mother's handwriting, careful and clear despite cold, stiffened fingers. Dear David, today I saw a cardinal in the snow. Do you remember when you were 6 and you wanted to keep one as a pet? You cried when I explained they needed to be free to be happy. I think about that a lot now. Some people are like cardinals. They need space to heal. I understand if you need space, but I want you to know wherever you are, you're still my son. You're still my whole heart. Come home when you're ready. I'll be waiting. Love always, Mom. David's knees buckled. He sank to the floor. The letter clutched against his chest and sobbed like a child. Bill sat down beside him on the cold tile. 2 broken men in a sterile room at 3 in the morning, both carrying daughters and sons and ghosts that wouldn't rest. Let's go see your mother, Bill said quietly. David nodded, unable to speak. What neither of them knew was that across town, Christopher Thompson sat in a lawyer's office making a deal that would destroy everything. And watching from a distance, a young waitress named Emily Parker was recording every word. Bill found Margaret on the same bench in Public Garden where his security team had tracked David on Saturdays. She sat feeding pigeons with bread someone had given her, snow settling on her shoulders like a shawl. When she saw Bill approaching with another man, she didn't recognize her son at first. Then David pulled off his knit cap, and Margaret's hands flew to her mouth. David. He couldn't speak, could only nod as tears carved paths down his face. Margaret stood on unsteady legs. 10 years collapsed into the space between them. Then she was running as much as a woman ravaged by cold and hunger could run, and David caught her. They held each other and wept. And Bill turned away to give them privacy he wished someone had given him and Sarah. "I'm sorry," David kept saying. "I'm so sorry, Mom." "Hush now, hush. You're here. That's all that matters." Bill had reserved a suite at the Thompson Harbor Hotel, the best he owned. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the waterfront. A fireplace that actually worked. Furniture that whispered luxury. Margaret walked through it like she'd entered a museum, afraid to touch anything. "This is too much," she protested. "It's not enough," Bill replied. He'd ordered room service soup, bread, roasted chicken, vegetables. Food that was nourishing but wouldn't shock a system unused to abundance. David helped his mother to the table, and Bill watched them together. The way Margaret touched her son's face like proving he was real. The way David held her hand like he'd never let go. Tom Richardson sent flowers. 3 dozen white roses with a card that read, "Thank you for saving me twice." Over the next 2 days, the pieces fell into place. Bill arranged for Margaret to see a doctor who confirmed what Bill had suspected: advanced pneumonia, malnutrition, early signs of heart failure. Treatable, but only if she stopped living on streets. David moved into a hotel room 2 floors down from his mother. Bill's personal physician started him on treatment for PTSD therapy, medication, a structured plan. The nightmares didn't stop. But David slept in a bed for the first time in years, and slowly. Margaret told Bill what he'd waited 40 years to hear. They sat in Bill's private library at his Beacon Hill home. Margaret had asked to see where Sarah was buried. So Bill brought her here, to the garden behind the house where a marble monument stood beneath a copper beech tree. Sarah Elizabeth Thompson, beloved daughter. Taken too soon. David stood with them, his hand on his mother's shoulder. Margaret reached into her coat, a new coat now, warm and proper, and pulled out Rebecca's necklace. "She gave me this right before she died," Margaret said, pressing it into Bill's palm. "Made me promise to find you when you needed it most. She knew. Somehow. She knew you'd need it." Bill's fingers closed around the silver, still warm from Margaret's throat. "What did she say?" Margaret looked at the monument to Sarah, at the dates that proved a life cut short. When she spoke, her voice was steady but soft, carrying words that had waited 4 decades to be heard. She said, "Tell William I love him, but he must let go." She said, "Sarah is not meant to live long. She's an angel borrowed from heaven, and heaven wants her back." She said, Margaret's voice caught. She said, "When you're lost, when you can't find your way, look for the blue-eyed angel. That's how you'll find your way home." Bill's legs wouldn't hold him. He sank onto the cold bench beside Sarah's monument. David caught his elbow, steadied him. "She knew," Bill whispered. "Rebecca knew Sarah would die young. I think she did, Margaret said gently. Some mothers know things. Some mothers feel what's coming. Rebecca told me. Love never dies. William, it just transforms. Tell him that. Tell him love transforms. Bill pressed his face into his hands and wept. Great, racking sobs that came from a place 40 years deep. Margaret sat beside him, her hand on his back, and David stood guard over both of them. When Bill could breathe again, when the tears had run dry, he looked up at Margaret and David and made a decision. I'm establishing a foundation, he said. $50 million. Rebecca's Promise Foundation. It'll help nurses who can't afford retirement, veterans struggling with PTSD, homeless people trying to get back on their feet. Margaret started to protest, but Bill held up his hand. Margaret, I want you to be the director of community outreach. Salary is $120,000 a year. You'll guide where the money goes. Make sure it reaches people who need it. Mr. Thompson, I can't. You can. You will. He turned to David. And I want you in our veteran support program. Full treatment. Full support. When you're ready, we'll find a place for you in the foundation too. David's throat worked. Why are you doing this? Because your mother spent 40 years taking care of everyone else. Because you saved my life when you didn't have to. Because Sarah would want me to. Bill stood, walked to the monument, placed his hand on the cold marble. Because it's time I transformed my grief into something that matters. On the last day of the year, Bill held a press conference. Christopher stood in the back, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Media packed the room, cameras rolling, reporters jostling. Bill announced the foundation. $50 million dedicated to the forgotten nurses, veterans, the homeless. He introduced Margaret Hayes, Director of Community Outreach, and David Hayes, first recipient of the Veteran Rehabilitation Program. The story went viral within hours. Homeless woman and billionaire. Lost son found. Christmas miracle. The hashtag Blue-Eyed Angel trended nationally. News outlets called it the feel-good story of the year. That night, Margaret and David and Bill sat together in Bill's library, watching snow fall beyond the windows. For the first time in longer than any of them could remember, the future felt possible. The weight they'd carried seemed lighter. The grief transformed into something that resembled hope. To new beginnings, Bill said, raising a glass of wine. Margaret lifted her tea, David his water. They toasted to survival, to second chances, to the strange paths that brought broken people together. None of them saw the storm gathering. Christopher Thompson sat in lawyer Benjamin Corliss's office across town, signing papers that would tear everything apart. Are you sure about this? Corliss asked. Chris didn't hesitate. My father isn't thinking clearly. Someone has to protect the family legacy, even if it's from him. What Chris didn't know was that Emily Parker, the young waitress from Chateau Noir, sat in her beat-up Honda in the parking garage below, her phone pressed against the building's ventilation grate, recording every word through the vent system. Emily had reasons of her own for watching Christopher Thompson. Reasons that would change everything. But that night, in Bill's library, there was only peace. Only the sound of snow against windows and the warmth of people who'd found each other in the cold. It felt like an ending. It was only the beginning of the fall. The news broke on New Year's Eve like a grenade. Christopher Thompson, flanked by 3 lawyers, including Benjamin Corliss, held his own press conference at 4 in the afternoon. The timing was strategic, late enough to catch evening news, early enough to dominate social media through the night. "It is with deep regret," Chris began, his voice practiced and smooth, "that I must address concerns about my father's mental competency. William Thompson is a man I love and respect. But over the past year, his judgment has deteriorated significantly. The most recent example, his impulsive decision to give away $50 million to strangers he met days ago, is part of a disturbing pattern." The reporters leaned forward, cameras focused. "My father suffers from early-onset dementia. We have medical documentation supporting this diagnosis." Corliss held up a folder thick with papers. "For the safety of Thompson Hospitality Group's 15,000 employees, for the security of our investors, and most importantly, for my father's own well-being, we are filing for conservatorship." The room erupted with questions. Chris raised his hand for silence. "There's more. Recent DNA testing has revealed that my sister Sarah, who tragically died 14 years ago, was not my father's biological daughter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "This means that the inheritance my father received from my mother, Rebecca Thompson, the foundation upon which Thompson Hospitality Group was built, was never legally his. As Rebecca's legally adopted son, I am her rightful heir. My father has been operating under false pretenses for 40 years." The story detonated across every platform. By midnight, as fireworks exploded over Boston Harbor, the narrative had crystallized: homeless con artist manipulates sick billionaire, gold digger targets dying man's fortune, veteran scammer part of elaborate scheme. Margaret's face appeared on screens everywhere, the photo from Bill's press conference. Her gaunt features and worn coat transformed from symbols of survival into evidence of deception. David's military record was scrutinized, his PTSD treatment reframed as convenient excuse. Message boards filled with vitriol. She saw an opportunity and took it. "This is why you don't trust homeless people. That poor old man being taken advantage of." Bill watched it unfold from his hotel suite, his phone ringing constantly. Margaret sat frozen, staring at the television as her character was destroyed in real time. David paced like a caged animal, his hands shaking, his breathing rapid. "We need to respond," Bill said, reaching for his phone. "No." Margaret's voice was hollow. "It won't matter what we say. They've decided who we are. Then we'll show them they're wrong." "How?" "By throwing money at it. By holding more press conferences. They want a villain. Mr. Thompson. They found one." At 11:37 that night, Bill collapsed. David caught him before he hit the floor, calling for an ambulance while Margaret pressed her hand to Bill's chest, counting the erratic heartbeats. The hotel lobby erupted in camera flashes as paramedics wheeled Bill out. Someone leaked it within minutes. Billionaire hospitalized after confrontation with alleged con artist. Massachusetts General Hospital. The same hospital where Margaret had worked for 20 years? The oncologist, Dr. Patricia Chen, knew Bill's case intimately. She pulled David and Margaret into a conference room, her expression grave. "The cancer has progressed faster than we anticipated. The stress," she glanced at Margaret with barely concealed accusation, "accelerated everything. I'm revising my prognosis. 2 months, perhaps 3. He said he had 6 months, David said numbly. That was 6 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate. Margaret stood abruptly, walked to the window. Boston sprawled below, indifferent and glittering. Behind her, she heard Dr. Chen tell David that visitors would be limited, that Bill needed rest, that perhaps it would be better if certain people stayed away. She meant Margaret. In Bill's hospital room, monitors beeped steadily. He looked smaller in the bed, diminished. His eyes found Margaret in the doorway. "Don't you dare apologize," he said before she could speak. "I should leave. This is my fault. Chris is my fault. I raised him to value money over people. I created this." Bill tried to sit up, winced. "We fight this, together." But Margaret saw the truth in the monitors, in the gray tint of his skin, in the way he couldn't lift his right hand without trembling. Bill was dying, and fighting Chris would kill him faster. "I'm tired," she said softly. "I think I'll get some rest." She left before he could argue. Benjamin Corliss found her on the morning of January 3rd in the hotel lobby. He sat down uninvited, placed a leather portfolio on the table between them. "Mrs. Hayes, may I call you Margaret?" She said nothing. "I represent Christopher Thompson's interests, but I'm not an unreasonable man. I understand your position is difficult. Perhaps we can find a solution that benefits everyone." Corliss opened the portfolio. Inside was a check made out to Margaret Hayes for $500,000. "Here's what I propose. You take this check. You leave Boston. You never contact the Thompson family again. Your son receives a guarantee of no legal prosecution for his, shall we say, irregular employment situation. The IRS has questions about 10 years of unreported income. The Veterans Affairs Office has concerns about benefit fraud. These problems could disappear." Margaret stared at the check. More money than she'd seen in 15 years. More than enough to start over somewhere warm. Somewhere her lungs could heal. Somewhere she and David could build something new. Or, Corliss continued, his tone pleasant. "You stay. You fight. Christopher's lawyers are very thorough. They'll discover that David Hayes has been working illegally for 6 years, evading taxes, violating the terms of his veteran status, federal prison, minimum 5 years. You'll watch your son go to jail while Bill Thompson dies, and you're left with nothing but legal fees you can't afford." He slid the check closer. $500,000. Your son's freedom. All you have to do is walk away. Margaret's hand trembled as she picked up the check. The numbers blurred through tears. $500,000. David's safe. Bill could die in peace without her dragging him through more scandal. Love meant letting go. Rebecca had said that. Sometimes love meant sacrifice. "I need 24 hours, Margaret whispered. "You have 12. That night, Margaret sat in her hotel room writing 2 letters, one to David, one to Bill. Her hand cramped, but she kept writing, trying to explain what couldn't be explained. How much she loved them. How this was the only way. How some people were meant to be cardinals, wild and free and unable to be caged. Even by love. She finished at dawn, placed both letters on her pillow, took nothing but the clothes on her back and the check folded in her pocket. David woke at 8 to find his mother gone. Only a note remained, her handwriting shaky but clear. "My dearest David, I'm sorry. This is the only way to protect you. They'll use you against me, and I won't let that happen. You are my whole heart. and a mother's job is to keep her child safe, even when that child is a grown man. I love you more than breath. Don't look for me. Live. Be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. Your mom. David's scream brought hotel security running. They found him on his knees, the note clutched in both hands, his whole body shaking with sobs that sounded like they were tearing him apart from the inside. The PTSD that had been managed for 2 weeks erupted with savage force. David couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but relive every loss: his fallen brothers in Afghanistan, his father's death, his mother's disappearance, all of it crashing over him at once. They sedated him, took him back to the Veterans Center where he'd been receiving treatment. But David was gone somewhere deep inside himself. Back in the desert, back in the dark, back where the guilt lived and the ghosts never stopped screaming. In his hospital bed, Bill read Margaret's letter and wept. "I'm sorry," she'd written. "You reminded me what it felt like to be seen. But some things are more important than being seen. David is my son. I'll burn the world down to keep him safe. Thank you for everything. You gave me hope. That's more than most people get. Please forgive me. Margaret." Bill's heart monitor spiked. Nurses rushed in, adjusted medications, spoke in soothing voices about stress and rest. But Bill knew the truth. Christopher had won, and the 2 people Bill had finally learned to love were gone. Emily Parker appeared in Bill's hospital room on the morning of January 6th. The nurses tried to stop her, but she had a badge not press, but legal, Harvard Law student ID. She carried a laptop and a manila folder thick with documents. "Mr. Thompson, my name is Emily Parker. You don't know me, but I know you, and I know where Margaret is." Bill struggled to sit up. "Where? In a minute. First, you need to see this." Emily set her laptop on the rolling table. Pressed play. The video showed Christopher and Benjamin Corliss in a law office, their voices clear through the recording. The DNA test. Chris's voice. "You're certain it'll hold up?" "I paid the lab tech $50,000 to falsify the results." Corliss replied, "Bill Thompson is Sarah's biological father, always was. But by the time anyone thinks to retest, we'll have control of the company. After that, it doesn't matter what the truth is." Bill's monitor spiked. Emily paused the video. There's more. Financial records showing Corliss embezzled $2.1 million from Sarah's Light Foundation. Communications proving Chris knew about your cancer and deliberately accelerated his legal action to prevent you from changing your will. Emily's hands were steady as she laid out document after document. "I have everything. Enough to put both of them in prison for a decade." "How did you get this?" Emily's blue eyes met his. The same shade as Margaret's, as David's, as Sarah's. "Because Margaret Hayes is my grandmother, and David Hayes is my father, and I've been waiting 10 years to protect them the way they couldn't protect themselves." The room tilted. Bill gripped the bed rail. "David's daughter, born in 2003. My mother was Jessica Collins. She and David dated in high school, before he enlisted. She didn't tell him she was pregnant, thought it would distract him from basic training. She died, giving birth to me. Complications. The hospital couldn't reach David overseas." Emily's voice remained clinical, detached, but her hands betrayed her, twisting together. My grandmother Margaret raised me until I was 14. Then she lost everything trying to save my great-uncle Bobby. She couldn't afford to keep me. I went into foster care. Emily pulled out a birth certificate. Father David Hayes, Mother Jessica Ann Collins. Emergency contact Margaret Hayes. Grandmother. David doesn't know. No. My mother's family kept me from him. Said a Marine with PTSD wasn't fit to raise a child. They weren't wrong. Probably. But they weren't right either. Emily's jaw tightened. I've been looking for my father for 8 years. Found him 6 months ago working nights at Boston Medical. I was doing research there for pre-law. I saw him cleaning an operating room, and I knew same eyes. Same way of moving. I followed him, watched him, made sure he was okay. Why didn't you tell him? Because he was barely surviving. Because adding me to his guilt would have killed him. Emily closed the laptop. Then you found him, and my grandmother. And for 2 weeks, I watched my family become whole, until Christopher Thompson decided to destroy it. Where is Margaret? Emily's expression softened. St. Francis Shelter? She's been there since the morning of January 3rd. But Mr. Thompson, she's dying. Bill was already pulling out his IV. Nurses rushed in. He waved them off. Get me discharged. Now. Sir, you can't. I said now. Tom Richardson met Bill in the hospital lobby. But Tom wasn't wearing his restaurant manager clothes. He wore a white coat, a stethoscope around his neck, an ID badge that read, Dr. Thomas Richardson, Internal Medicine. You're a doctor? Bill said numbly. Was a doctor. Retired last year. The restaurant manager job is, I don't know, something to do. Keep busy. Tom held up a folder. But I still have privileges here. I ran the DNA test again myself. Drew your blood while you were sleeping, called in favors with the lab. He handed Bill the results. You are Sarah's biological father. Christopher's test was falsified. But there's something else. Tom pointed to a section of genetic markers. This marker here, it's rare. Associated with heightened intuition, deep empathy, sometimes precognitive awareness. Rebecca had it. Sarah had it. That's why Rebecca knew Sarah wouldn't live long. Some people with this marker just know things. Bill stared at the paper. That's not possible. It's genetic fact, and Margaret Hayes has the same marker. I tested her blood when she came through the ER, did some genealogy research. Tom pulled out another document. Margaret's grandmother was Moira O'Brien. Rebecca's great-grandmother was Moira's sister. Catherine O'Brien, they're cousins, third cousins, 4 times removed. But family. That's why Rebecca told Margaret to find me. She knew. She knew. Tom nodded. And David has the marker too, inherited from Margaret. That's why he had such strong connections to his fellow soldiers. Why he feels their death so deeply. It's not just PTSD, Bill. It's genetic empathy he can't turn off. Bill's hands shook as he held the papers. Family. They'd all been family and never knew it. I need to see Margaret. They found her at St. Francis Shelter. The same place Bill's security team had tracked 2 weeks ago when this all began. She was in a small room with white walls and a narrow bed, an oxygen tube in her nose, her breathing shallow and labored. A doctor met them outside her door. She has maybe 2 weeks, 3 at most, advanced pneumonia, heart failure, malnutrition damage we can't reverse. We're keeping her comfortable. Why didn't she take the money? Bill asked. Corliss offered her $500,000 to leave. Emily answered. Because my grandmother doesn't have a price. She sent the check back with a note. I found it in Corliss's trash. She held up a photocopy. On the back of the check, in Margaret's careful handwriting, "You can't buy dignity." Bill entered the room quietly. Margaret's eyes were closed, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. But when he sat in the chair beside her bed, her eyes opened. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Hospital. I discharged myself. Stubborn man. Stubborn woman." Margaret's lips curved slightly. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I let you feel like you had to." Bill took her hand. "Why this shelter of all the places in Boston? Why here?" Margaret's eyes drifted to the window. Snow fell beyond the glass, soft and persistent. "I've been coming here for 5 years, since I found out. Found out what? That I was dying." Margaret's voice was so quiet Bill had to lean close. "Last November, doctor at the free clinic told me. Pneumonia turning into something worse. No money for treatment. Maybe 6 months. You knew, at Christmas Eve. You knew. I wanted one good meal before I died. Something beautiful. Something that reminded me what it felt like to be human." She turned her head to look at him. "I chose Chateau Noir because 45 years ago, I saw you and Rebecca there. You proposed to her at table 9. I was working a double shift, delivering meals to the restaurant from the hospital cafeteria. I saw her say yes. I saw how much you loved each other." Bill's throat closed. "I wanted to close the circle. See that table one more time. Feel what love looked like. Even if it wasn't mine." Margaret squeezed his hand weakly. "Then you looked at me with those eyes. And you saw me. Really saw me. And I thought maybe there's still magic in the world. Maybe even dying people get miracles." "You got more than a miracle," Bill said. "You got family. David is fine. Struggling, but fine. And he has a daughter. Margaret, you have a granddaughter. Emily Parker, 22 years old, Harvard Law. She's been watching over David for months. You know," Margaret's eyes widened. "Emily Jessica's baby. All grown up, smart as hell. She's the one who got the evidence to put Chris and Corliss away. She's the one who found you." Tears tracked down Margaret's cheeks. "I thought she was lost. I thought. She was never lost. She was preparing. She was becoming someone who could protect her family." Bill helped Margaret sit up slightly. "She wants to meet you. Properly. As your granddaughter. I don't have much time. Then we won't waste it." Emily entered the room, and Margaret saw her son's eyes in her granddaughter's face. Saw her own stubbornness in the set of Emily's jaw. Saw Jessica's gentle spirit in the way Emily moved. "Hi, Grandma," Emily said softly. "I've been looking for you for a long time." Margaret opened her arms, and Emily fell into them. And they held each other while snow fell outside and machines beeped steadily, and the world beyond the room tried to make sense of how a homeless woman and a billionaire and a broken veteran and a Harvard law student could possibly be family. But they were. Blood wasn't what made them family. Love was, and love, as Rebecca had promised 40 years ago, never died. It just transformed. Emily Parker walked into the district attorney's office with 12 hours of recorded conversations, 40 pages of financial documents, and a rage that had been building for 10 years. The prosecutor listened to 3 minutes of audio before calling the FBI. Benjamin Corliss was arrested at his home on January 10th. The charges included embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, falsification of medical records, and witness tampering. Federal crimes with federal sentences. His bail was set at $5 million money he'd stolen and could no longer access. Christopher Thompson wasn't arrested. Emily had been careful in her documentation. The recordings showed Chris being manipulated, lied to, fed false information about his father's mental state. Chris had genuinely believed he was protecting Bill from con artists. He was guilty of poor judgment and desperation, not criminal intent. Still, the conservatorship case collapsed within 48 hours. The falsified DNA test was exposed. Bill's mental competency was reaffirmed by 3 independent psychiatrists. The court dismissed every claim. Christopher came to Bill's hospital room on January 14th. He stood in the doorway like a man facing execution, his shoulders hunched, his face hollow. "I'm sorry." Chris's voice broke. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought Corliss told me you were being manipulated. He showed me documents, medical files. I thought I was saving you." Bill looked at his son, at the boy he'd adopted at age 5 after Rebecca died. The boy he'd raised poorly, taught to value spreadsheets over people, success over connection. Bill had created this. Every bad choice Chris made traced back to Bill's parenting. "Come here," Bill said. Chris approached slowly. Bill reached for his hand. "You're still my son. Adopted or not, you're mine. I failed you. Chris, I taught you to measure worth in dollars instead of love. That's on me. I almost destroyed everything you built. No, I almost destroyed it by building it wrong in the first place." Bill squeezed Chris's hand. "We're going to fix this. Together." But there wasn't time for slow reconciliation. Bill's cancer progressed aggressively. Dr. Chen revised her prognosis again, 6 weeks, maybe 8. The hospital wanted to keep him for end-of-life care. Bill refused. "Discharge me," he told the doctors. "I'm not dying in a hospital bed." They tried to argue. He signed forms releasing them from liability. On January 16th, against medical advice, Bill Thompson walked out of Massachusetts General Hospital with a bag of medications and maybe 2 months to live. He went straight to St. Francis Shelter. Margaret was sitting up when he arrived. Oxygen tube in place. Her breathing labored but steady. She looked at him, at the bag in his hand, and understood immediately. "You're an idiot," she said. "So are they. We might as well be idiots together." Bill sat on the edge of her bed. "If we're both dying, let's die doing something meaningful." That's how the 60 days began. Bill moved into the room next to Margaret's. Paid for both rooms, paid to upgrade the medical equipment, paid for anything the shelter needed. But he didn't write checks from a distance. He showed up. Every morning at 6, Bill Thompson, worth $520 million, stood in the shelter kitchen making soup. Industrial batches that fed 200 people. His hands shook from medication, but he kept stirring, kept chopping vegetables, kept working. Margaret taught the young nurses who volunteered at the shelter. Even from her bed, even with oxygen support, she demonstrated how to dress wounds, how to talk to people experiencing trauma, how to see the person instead of the problem. David led support groups for veterans with PTSD. 8 men and women, all struggling, all barely holding on. He didn't preach or lecture. He just told the truth about his nightmares, his guilt, his failures. He told them about choosing 30 lives over 2 and carrying that choice like broken glass in his chest. "We're not broken," David said during one session. "We're just carrying more than we were built for. But we're still here. That means we're strong enough to carry it." Emily documented everything. She recorded oral histories from the homeless population, their stories, their dreams, what they'd lost and what they hoped to find. She was writing a book, Blue-Eyed Angels Among Us. Every story a reminder that homeless people were just people without homes. Tom Richardson came 3 times a week, bringing food from Chateau Noir. Real food, restaurant quality, served with dignity. He hired 2 homeless men to help with delivery, paid them fairly, taught them the restaurant business. The days blurred together. Good days when Margaret could sit in the common room. Bad days when she couldn't breathe without machines. Bill's pain increased steadily. Cancer in his bones now, in his liver, everywhere. The medications made him fuzzy, but he refused to increase the doses. He wanted to be present, even if being present hurt. They talked late into the night, Bill and Margaret, about Rebecca and Sarah, about Robert and David, about choices made and time lost and grace found in unexpected places. They didn't talk about dying. They talked about living, about the days they had instead of the days they'd lost. On March 10th, David brought Margaret her favorite flowers, white roses, the ones Tom had sent weeks ago. Margaret held them carefully, her hands paper-thin and trembling. "Do you remember when you were 6?" she asked David. "You wanted to catch a cardinal and keep it as a pet." David smiled. "You told me cardinals needed to be free to be happy. I was wrong." Margaret's voice was fading. "Cardinals need to fly, but they always come home to the tree they know. You came home, David. That's all I ever wanted." 5 days later, on March 15th at 3 in the morning, Margaret Hayes died. David and Emily sat on either side of her bed. Bill held her hand. Her breathing had been getting shallower for hours, each breath a little weaker than the last. At the end, she opened her eyes, looked at each of them, smiled. "David, you were always enough. Emily, you are my second chance. Bill, thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be seen." Then she closed her eyes. 3 breaths later, she was gone. The funeral was held at Old South Church. 2,000 people came. Homeless veterans in their best clothes. Nurses from Massachusetts General. Former patients Margaret had treated 40 years ago. People whose lives she'd touched in ways they'd never forgotten. Tom Richardson gave the eulogy. "Margaret Hayes taught me that saving someone's life isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up. It's about seeing people when everyone else looks away. She saved my life when I was 15. She saved hundreds of lives over her career. But most importantly, she saved souls. She saved people from believing they didn't matter." After the service, David received a package. Inside were 2,847 letters. Every letter he'd written to his mother, the ones he'd never sent. And beneath them, 2,847 replies. She'd written back every single day, even knowing he'd never read them. In one letter from the week before she died, Margaret had written, "My dearest David, if you're reading this, I've gone ahead. Don't cry too long. I had a good death surrounded by family. Knowing you were safe, understanding that love never ends. Take care of your daughter. Take care of Bill. Take care of yourself. You were my greatest joy. Love always and forever. Mom." Bill lived 3 months longer than doctors predicted. Purpose, they said. Having something to live for could extend life beyond medical expectations. He spent those months transforming St. Francis Shelter into something permanent. Margaret's Home, he called it. A state-of-the-art facility for veterans and homeless populations. Medical care, mental health services, job training, housing assistance. Everything Margaret would have wanted. On June 10th, Bill Thompson died in his sleep in the same room where Margaret had died. Chris sat beside him. They'd spent the last 3 months building something new, not a business relationship, but an actual father-son connection. Bill's will was read a week later. $520 million, divided 3 ways. 50% to Rebecca's Promise Foundation, 30% to David Hayes and Emily Parker, 20% to Christopher Thompson. With one condition: Chris had to volunteer at Margaret's Home for 5 years before receiving the money. Chris didn't hesitate. He signed the agreement that afternoon. The final gift was revealed in August. Bill had purchased St. Francis Shelter and the surrounding block, transformed it into Margaret's Home, the most comprehensive support center for veterans and homeless populations in New England. Grand opening scheduled for December 24th. 1 year after everything began. Christmas Eve arrived with snow. David Hayes stood in the lobby of Margaret's Home, watching 500 people file in for dinner. The facility was beautiful, warm lighting, comfortable furniture, dignity in every detail. This was what his mother had dreamed of. This was her legacy made real. Emily worked the registration desk, helping people sign in, making sure everyone felt welcome. She graduated Harvard Law in May, passed the bar in July, and immediately started a nonprofit law firm specializing in veterans' rights and housing advocacy. Chris Thompson served food alongside Tom Richardson. Chris had been volunteering 6 days a week for 6 months. He'd lost 20 pounds, gained something like peace. Tom had opened a restaurant training program at Margaret's Home, teaching homeless people culinary skills, then helping them find jobs. At 11:45, David stepped outside. 1 year ago, his mother had stood in snow asking for leftover food. Now hundreds of people ate restaurant-quality meals in a building named for her. The snow fell exactly like it had that night. Soft, persistent, beautiful. David looked up at the sky. 2 stars burned brighter than the rest, positioned side by side. He didn't believe in signs, but he believed in love. And love, his mother had taught him, transformed. "We're carrying on your light, Mom, you and Bill. We're carrying it forward." Inside, Emily wore Rebecca's silver necklace. The circle closed. The love transformed. And somewhere in the falling snow, cardinals found their way home. If you're reading this, maybe you've felt invisible too. Maybe you've walked past someone who needed help and looked away because it was easier. Maybe you've carried guilt about choices you made years ago, wondering if it's too late to make things right. Maybe you've lost people you loved and wondered what legacy you're leaving behind. Here's what Margaret and Bill taught us: it's never too late. You are never too broken to be someone's light. You are never too old to transform your pain into purpose. The greatest gift we can give isn't money or success. It's seeing people, really seeing them. It's showing up when everyone else walks away. It's believing that love doesn't end. It just changes shape. Margaret died with nothing but left everything that mattered: a son who found peace, a granddaughter who found family, a man who found meaning, and thousands of people who found hope. Bill died wealthy, but his real fortune was those last 60 days when he finally understood what Rebecca meant. Love transforms. So look around your life today. Who needs to be seen? What pain can you transform? What light can you carry forward? Your story isn't over. There's still time to matter. Have you ever looked past someone who needed help and regretted it later? When was the last time you felt truly seen by another person? Share your thoughts below. Your story matters. We're listening.